Justine Raftis, who's going to tell us about national policy initiatives that are top of mind for the Canadian Canola Growers Association. Justine is a policy manager with the CCGA, where she focuses on environment and sustainability issues affecting 43,000 canola farmers in Canada. She has spent the last 5 years working in the agriculture industry in Saskatchewan, including in-field carrying out water monitoring programs and working with farmers to design and implement ecological goods and services projects on the landscape. She now focuses on monitoring and participating in ongoing environment and sustainability policy development, assessing implication of changes, and researching and developing policy alternatives. Justine holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Environmental Science. Please welcome Justine.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so as mentioned, I'm Justine Raftis. I work for the Canadian Canola Growers Association, which I will just refer to as CCGA for the rest of the day. There's lots of acronyms coming your way, so just prepare yourselves here. So for an agenda, I just wanted to, kind of go over a little bit of what CCGA does, who we are, what we offer, some of our focus areas. I'll dive a little bit into the advocacy work that we're doing over in Ottawa, and then I'm also going to spend majority of the time on our policy development, specifically the environment and sustainability file, as that's where I focus most of my time, well, all of my time actually. So who are we? So CCGA is a farmer-led organization. We represent over 43,000 canola farmers across Canada. We bring canola farmer voices to agriculture policy conversations on a national and international level. And we also are the leading administrator of the Advanced Payments Program since 1984. So this is a federal loan program. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but we are the leading organization across Canada for this loan program. This is just a nice visual to kind of give everyone a little bit of an overview of Canola Council of Canada, CCGA, how we interplay with the provincial groups, and really kind of where our focus areas lie. So for CCGA, we are that national ag policy organization. So the three provincial groups in the middle there, Alberta Canola, Saskatchewan Canola, and the Manitoba Canola Growers are our members, as well as Ontario and BC. And then on the other side, you have Canola Council of Canada, and they're more of that value chain side of things as well. So, the provincial groups are in the middle there and connected to both, but they kind of branch out a little bit more into that value chain side of things with the life science companies and Canadian Oilseed Processors Association and the Western Grain Elevators. So CCGA, we do have 10 board members. I'm not going to put all of their photos up here. I thought I would pick out the ones that are in Saskatchewan, so if you know them, tell them I did a great job today. So we have Mike Amiter, he's our chair, but he's actually out in Alberta, and then we have Dean Roberts and Bernie McLean, who are our board members from Saskatchewan. So back to the Advanced Payments Program. I'm not going to dive too deep into this one, but as I mentioned, it's a federal loan program that CCGA administers, and we've been the top administrator since 1984. It provides interest-free and low-interest financing. I believe it's about the first $250,000 right now that's interest-free. And just so everyone is aware, if you do participate in the program, our launch date will be around mid-February. So if you've already been involved, you will get an email. And if you're not, feel free to go to our website and check it out for more information, just ccga.ca. Okay, so advocacy. So CCGA, we do have an office in Ottawa. And that's where we do a lot of our advocacy. We advocate for growers' interests through direct representation to parliamentarians, legislators, and government officials. And hot off the press, just released, I think about a week ago now, CCGA was reported as the most active lobby organization in Canada. So this is regardless of sector, and this was reported by the Lobby Monitor. So we just found this out, like I said, last week. But it's really, an amazing accomplishment to know that CCGA is at these tables, in these conversations, more than really any other group right now in any sector across Canada. So, great work going on in Ottawa. Another little kind of plug here, along with Canola Council of Canada, we do put out a feature in Canola Digest. in every issue so far. I think we've done about 3, and it's really just to kind of, build that interest into agriculture policy. So our most recent feature came out in January, and it was focused on our lobby day that we did back in November. So we had all of our board members go into Ottawa and bring the voice of canola farmers right there in Ottawa at those conversations, at those tables. So yeah, take a peek. If you guys read Canola Digest, you'll see our latest feature there in January on our lobby day. And more to come. Okay, so policy development. This is where I'm going to spend most of my time today. CCGA, we participate in federal level discussions and work to affect change on behalf of Canada's canola growers through a research on and development of policy alternatives. So I will say, policy is a little bit of a slower game. I think you'll see on one of my slides coming up here that one of the items of focus has been about a 6-year progress or process. So just keep that in mind as I'm going through a lot of the topics I'll discuss in a little bit here. But right now we focus on 7 different kind of policy areas. We call them files. So the first is trade. Trade and marketing have kind of they're put together, so one person focuses on both of those. We have transportation and biofuels. I focus on environment and sustainability. We have a policy manager focused on business risk management, and then we also take a look at crop inputs as well. So for trade and marketing, we have our senior manager, Janelle, who focuses on this file. And I'm going to give just kind of a couple brief highlights of a few of the things that she's focusing on right now, but like I said, I'll spend most of the time on the environment section. So right now she's looking at the modernization of the Canada Grain Act and the Canada Grains Commission. It hasn't been overhauled for about 40 years, I believe now. So she is taking a look at, making sure that changes can be made to really reflect the realities of today and the future. So along with, and in conjunction with SAS Canola and a couple of the other provincial groups, Manitoba and Alberta, there was about 25 recommendations that were put forward to the government on how to modernize the Act, the Commission, and the regulations as well. So that's kind of one of the focus areas that she's taking a look at right now. The next is focused on plant breeding. So just recently, Health Canada came out with some guidance around gene editing specifically, and noted, except in certain circumstances, very specific circumstances, gene-edited seed varieties will be treated the same as conventional seed varieties, which is good to hear. And we are still waiting for some guidance on environmental and feed, so we are still waiting for that side of things, but nice to see where Health Canada is going with it. And then finally, she also focuses on trade. So when it comes to trade, 90% of canola is exported to over 50 different countries. International trade is obviously crucial. So this is where she spends a lot of her time focusing on championing for open, rules-based trade and diverse market opportunities for canola growers. In addition, CCGA, this is again still Janelle's file, put out the 4th edition of a practical guide to navigating grain contracts. So this is, focused on better understanding negotiation, interpretation, and obligation of farmers when it comes to grain contracts. So this is available online if anyone is interested. It's at knowyourgrade.ca. If you would prefer to have a hard copy, feel free to call our office and we can mail you one. We can send you one in the mail, or there's some over there actually, so that's good to hear. You can go grab one from the table, I guess. That works out. And on top of that, if you do go to knowyourgrade.ca, there is also a recording of a webinar that happened last July where Janelle brought in some lawyers to talk about grain contracts and farmer rights. So you can go check out that recording if you have any questions or concerns about it. So next up, we have transportation and biofuels. This is Steve Pratt's file. This is where he spends most of his time focusing on, right now, monitoring the state of rail transportation annually. So his kind of little update on this was, CP and CN did struggle for several weeks around the holidays, but seem to be kind of back up and running as usual right now. Overall, year to date in terms of farmer deliveries, everything is strong. And that includes exports as well. So he also focuses on, right now, He's working with the broader grain industry to assess recommendations of the Minister of Transport's Supply Chain Task Force report. So due in part to some supply chain issues that happened late last year, the Minister of Transport struck up a supply chain task force, and they had about 100 days to put forward some recommendations on how to improve. So Steve is, reviewing this with the broader industry, the broader grain industry. So far, kind of the update is, a lot of the recommendations are aligned with a lot of the conversations and messages that are typically pushed forward on our behalf as well. So that's good to hear. And then finally, this is the one. It's been a 6-year process that you can see on here, so it's been a long time coming. But really championing a science-based approach related to the federal clean fuel regulations, which come into effect in 2023. So, a lot of this is already kind of set in stone. There are some, some areas that do need a little bit more interpretation just to confirm and make sure that there is minimal administrative burden. And that is what he's, spending some time booking some meetings and chatting with some folks just to get some clarification on those items right now. And then one last item to update in the transportation and biofuels file is some recent news, some industry news, I guess, that just came out. So Imperial Oil announced it's moving ahead with a $720 million commitment to building a renewable diesel facility in the Strathcona refinery complex. So that'll be starting in 2025. And really, the reason he asked me to point it out is because they're looking for locally sourced material for feedstock, which would be canola. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The next file is the business risk management file. So Michael Vadney is looking at this file and covering this one. The BRM suite of programs really works to cover economic losses caused by various perils. The suite includes agri-insurance, agri-stability, agri-invest, agri-recovery, and the advanced payments program, which I've already kind of touched on there. And I won't dive into every single one of these programs, but more so just to mention that, they're essential to assist with the economic stability of the agriculture sector. And some enrollment deadlines are fast approaching, so agri-insurance and agri-stability coming up here at the end of March and the end of April. One thing to note about this file before I dive into the environment file is there are some recent announcements through the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, so SCAP, around tying some environmental linkages to a few of these programs. Don't necessarily know exactly what they will look like as of yet, and they won't necessarily come into play until earlier 2024. But for agri-invest, it does sound like if you have over $1 million or more of allowable net sales, you will be required to have an environmental farm plan. So it's just kind of to give an idea of environment is really kind of tying into a lot of these different files as well. Okay, so environment and sustainability, this is my file, and this is where I'll spend the rest of my time chatting with you today. As I'm sure many of you are aware, today more than ever, people, consumers, government, industry, organizations, they're all interested in where food is coming from and if it was produced in a sustainable manner. As food insecurity continues to grow, there is this narrative focused on how to increase supply while still being economically, socially, and environmentally responsible. So this puts demand higher to demonstrate the sustainability of farms to consumers and to others. So right now in the environment sustainability file, these are just a couple things I'm highlighting here. Of course, the conversation is different depending on what the topic is, but we really work to highlight farmer sustainability to date. So, the conversation around sustainability is really ramping up right now, but that doesn't mean that farmers haven't been practicing sustainable practices for the last 20, however many years. So, we really try to make sure that we're highlighting sustainability to date when we're having some of these larger conversations on the national scale. We work to promote modern agriculture perspectives so farmers are able to access and use the tools that are best suited to them. So just making sure that farmers have access to these tools, we stick to science-based regulatory systems, and let them kind of make the decisions, or let farmers make the decisions that work best for your farms. And then we also work to ensure outcomes-based approaches that are not prescriptive. So really what this means is you get a target for what we want things to look like in 2030, and just making sure that it's not, okay, every farmer has to do A, B, C, and D to get there. Understanding that regionality piece, something that might work in, Ontario might not necessarily work in a farm, on a farm in Saskatchewan, or something that works on a farm in Saskatchewan might not work on a farm in southern Saskatchewan. So just making sure that farmers, again, have that flexibility. And then finally here, just ensuring the voice of canola farmers is in the conversation and is at the table where these discussions are being held. I know it seems like it's a little bit far from the farm gate when they're having these discussions on a national level, but they do come back to impact farmers, right? So before I dive into my focus areas, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of this bigger picture. Sustainable agriculture isn't just a discussion that's happening here in Canada. It's a discussion that is happening on this international scale. So, back when I talked about what CCGA does, we work on that national and that international level. So there really are some global policies that are dictating what we do on a national scale, especially when it comes to the environment and sustainability file. So there are direct influences on Canadian agriculture and environment policies and programs. So I'm going to just touch on a couple here, but so there are more that I won't be mentioning today. So for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 of them, and I'll talk about Sustainable Development Goal number 2 next, and I won't dive too deep into it now, but that is something that does impact the decisions that are being made here on more of a national scale in Canada. The Paris Agreement is focused on limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, or well below 2 degrees Celsius, with a goal right now of about 1.5 degrees Celsius. The interesting thing about this is it requires annual reporting from countries on greenhouse gas emissions. So that is what Canada has been producing through the National Inventory Report. So we are, we're required to report on this type of information on that international scale as well. And then finally here, just to mention, environmental social governance, corporate social responsibility. So there is this kind of other piece of that, the consumers looking for these sustainably produced food, just making sure that we can really tell canola farmers' story well in that sustainable sense, because we know it's there, so just making sure that we tell it well and we keep this environmental, corporate social responsibility in mind as well. So like I mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 is focused on zero hunger. Obviously, to be able to feed people, you have to be able to produce food, so agriculture plays a big part on this goal. Specifically, Target 2.4 is focused on sustainable food production systems and implementing resilient agricultural practices. So this is just, another kind of piece of that bigger puzzle. There's also, 2.4.1, not to get too deep into the weeds here, but it's focused again on that reporting back. So, this is where some of these targets that I'll be talking about next are coming from. And then really, on Canada's side, where we focus our time, what is Canada doing? I won't dive into each of these strategies or plans, but, healthy environment and healthy economy, Canada's Strengthened Climate Action Plan. That came out in about December 2020, and that was really, I believe the first time that the 30% fertilizer target was mentioned. The Federal Sustainable Development Strategy, this was just released. There's one from 2022 to 2026. That's kind of the time frame that it's in. This is in direct response to that Sustainable Development Goal I just talked about. We did participate in this consultation and submit, on behalf of canola farmers, really highlighted sustainable practices. We included things like conservation tillage for our practices, and really pushed that conversation there. The National Emissions Reduction Plan, I'll talk about that next. And the National Inventory Report I just mentioned under the Paris Agreement, that's what we report on every single year. That's where this little pie chart is from, and it's really, the entire sector, or the entire, country. It's not just the agriculture sector. So agriculture is a piece of this puzzle, but that National Inventory Report focuses on more. And then CCGA, so kind of, what do? We do participate in these consultations. We participate in these conversations with government, make sure, we're understanding these new targets and initiatives. And then we also did put out some sustainability goals. They were aligned with increasing production, increasing productivity, and sustainability. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these. They are on our website right now, and they actually will be revamped shortly. These are just based off of increasing to 52 bushels per acre, which I know has been mentioned. So this was in conjunction with Canola Council of Canada. We have these goals. But like I said, they are in the process of getting revamped. So right now, there's this push to increase food supply in a sustainable manner. There's also a bit of an increased spotlight on crop inputs and on crop protection products. So you'll kind of see this theme throughout my current priority areas that I'll be touching on next. The fertilizer emission reduction target, the pest management regulatory agency consultation that happened last year. These are all kind of reflective of this increased spotlight on these areas. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to chat about here is the sustainable agriculture strategy. I don't have too much to highlight, as this just came out in December of 2022. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada released a discussion document as well as initiated consultations. So that'll be something that CCGA will be participating in. They end of March, so we've got a couple months to look at it. But it'll cover soil health, climate adaptation, resilience, water, biodiversity, and climate change mitigation. And really, the goal of the sustainable agriculture strategy from what we've seen in the discussion document is focused on this really kind of integrated and coordinated approach moving forward to improve the agriculture sector's environmental performance. One thing I will say in this conversation, and something that we'll continue to push, is sustainability is not just the environmental pillar, it's more than that. It includes the economic and social side of things as well. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on those as well as environmental. One other thing I will mention about this briefly is there is an advisory committee that has been pulled together. So CCGA has been asked to join the advisory committee. There's about 20 other groups. So I'm participating on that. And again, like I said, it just kind of really begun. I think we had our second meeting, so not too much has come of it yet, but really looking for, we're really looking for that two-way dialogue, really increasing that streamlined conversation from, between government and farm organizations and industry, just to make sure we can be more on the same page moving forward, if that's something that can happen. So, okay, the next thing I'll talk about here is the emissions reduction plan. So this is the National Emission Reduction Plan that was released back in March of 2022. The plan calls on all sectors of the economy. So like I said, it's not just focused on agriculture, it's all sectors in this document particularly. And to, all of these sectors working together to meet Canada's emissions reduction target. So in that document, about $1 billion was announced to support the agriculture industry in particular. But what I specifically wanted to talk about is the actual target that's been set. So emission reduction target is 40 to 45% below 2020 or 2005 levels by 2030, and then net zero by 2050. So this is the larger goal for all of these sectors. And under that comes the fertilizer emission reduction target goal. So that is, the 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. Sorry to come at you with all of these dates and times and percentages, but they're up there. So, and this is focused on reducing absolute levels of greenhouse gas emissions associated with the application of fertilizers. So in their discussion document, this was released last year. There was an entire consultation process, and CCGA did submit to this and participated in the workshops. But, in the discussion document, it was mentioned the target is not about establishing a mandatory reduction in fertilizer use. It's focusing on fertilizer being more efficient, using new technologies and BMPs. So that was kind of their focus area in that document. And I'll just quickly highlight here some of CCGA's response. The actual response can be found online, but here's a few things that we did bring forward and made sure to highlight in our response to them. So, fertilizers are essential tools for farmers to use to increase yields and profitability while producing high-quality crops. I think that one's pretty straightforward. Farmers need flexibility to be able to do what works best for them and for their farms. There's no one-size-fits-all approach that will work here, and again, that's kind of a common thread, a common message that I've discussed earlier. Farmers will make investments when they're confident in the economic stability and sustainability of their operations. So again, tying in that 3-pillar piece of sustainability, not forgetting about the economic side of things. Improved modeling and data is going to be necessary to correctly measure what farmers are asked to manage. So this one here did come with a caveat that, we're not looking to obviously increase any sort of administrative burden here, but we need to understand kind of where we're starting to know where we're going. We also highlighted that measuring emissions based on an intensity basis, so per bushel, is, should be considered instead of absolute. So instead of just this is how much has been emitted, it should be looking at, how much have we increased our productivity over the last however many years, I guess, since the targets, would have been initiated, versus how much fertilizer has been used as well. So it would show that, our intensity or farmer intensity has been declining. They've been producing more and not necessarily using as much more fertilizer. So. And then lastly here, I have incentivizing the adoption of practices such as 4R, enhanced efficiency fertilizers. That should really be the focus area. And also keeping in mind here, we have this really accelerated timeline that they're looking at for this target. Incentives should be reflective of that. So making sure that if, this goal by 2030, or this goal's deadline is by 2030, we want to make sure that the incentives can support adoption of these new BMPs and these new practices as quickly and as quick of a pace as they're looking for. So, lastly here, just to flag, the target must remain voluntary. That was another kind of common theme that we put in there. And, we needed to, or we also added to, understand and acknowledge what farmers have already done to improve sustainability instead of kind of just starting from now and moving forward, making sure that we can take a look and acknowledge what has already been done to date. Okay, so the next thing here is the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, another acronym. They also had a consultation last year, and it was, right around similar time to the fertilizer consultation, so we participated in that one as well. It did have 3 kind of common objectives here. Looking at modernizing business processes, improving transparency, and increasing use of real-world data. So this consultation came with a whole kind of slew of technical working groups and meetings and other conversations that CCGA and myself were a part of. And we did submit a consultation response to this one as well, and I'll just kind of quickly highlight a few of the topics that we put in there. Really just making sure that we brought forward this concern around the impact that this consultation could have on farmer future access to pest control products. So really, making sure that we have that continued access to these safe products, and the importance of a science-based regulatory system and a robust decision-making process that the PMRA already has, just making sure that that's not altered through this consultation. We also talked about real-world data and how, it could actually assist and help with the ability to access innovative products. So making sure that, something like water monitoring or a water monitoring program brings forward that real-world data that could be useful instead of potentially having to use, a conservative model to make a decision. Finally, we talked about the need for more transparent communication to improve public trust in the food farmers produce, making sure that there is that public trust piece there and that the decisions that are being made, on these crop protection products are maybe a little bit more easily understood, so people feel comfortable and, increase that public trust piece. In addition, we also had an Advancing Agriculture campaign, so just a quick kind of mention here, over 1,500 farmers did submit through this. It's kind of like a click and submit campaign that came to emails, I believe. So there was over 1,500 farmers who participated in this as well. So an update on this consultation, there has been a report released. It's called a What We Heard report. We did check that out. And right now, some of these technical working groups are being brought back together to discuss some next steps moving forward. I have a slide in here on the lambda issue, on more of the policy side of things. I don't have too much to update, unfortunately, but really right now, indications to date sound like a decision, is unlikely to be made for the 2023 season. There has been an ask to kind of reinstate or an ask to reevaluate the decision, and as of right now, considering, it's already, I guess, February 1st, we might not be seeing anything before the season this year. But, from the policy side of things, we're really focused on more of that communication next step piece and looking at communicating the importance of this product for the, communicate the importance of the active on flea beetles and grasshoppers. Really looking at seeking some clarification around compliance and enforcement and how that will work. And then we're also looking to encourage a timely conclusion on the reinstatement application. So these are kind of more of the policy side of things where we're focusing our communication pieces on and where we're looking at with a situation like this. All right, the Agriculture Carbon Alliance and Bill C-234. So I just have a couple more to highlight here, but the ACA is, it's this national coalition of 15 farm organizations and 15 national farm organizations committed to meaningful and collaborative dialogue with the federal government around carbon pricing and more, not just carbon pricing, but it's kind of the main one that it started from. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, our VP of Industry and Government Relations in Ottawa, Dave Carey, is actually the co-chair of the ACA. I'm the co-chair of the technical committee, so we are heavily involved in it right now. And the current kind of, one of the main focus areas for the ACA is Bill C-234. So Bill C-234 is looking to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to extend the exemption for qualifying farming fuel to marketable gas and or marketable natural gas and propane. So this means, hopefully, if all goes well, there would be an exemption from the carbon surcharges for the use of this marketable natural gas and propane for things like grain drying, irrigation, heating and cooling of barns. And, really pushing this because an exemption is really the best solution. There's no viable alternative for, to be used for this type of, for heating and cooling of barns and for grain drying. And so if there is no viable alternative, why are we taking, this carbon surcharge from it? So in addition to that, we don't necessarily see carbon price rebates as adequate. So just making sure that we can add that in there to that exemptions and just kind of, get that amendment to the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. So right now, Bill C-234 is moving through Parliament. I don't necessarily have an update on if it's a for sure yes or anything like that yet, but the ACA and CCGA were working to promote and seek cross-party support for Bill C-234 as it does move through Parliament in Ottawa. All right, and the last one I want to talk about is environmental goods and services. So this is kind of, the biodiversity piece. This is an area where I've been spending a little bit of time researching ways that farmers can get recognized for some of these ecological goods and services that farms provide. Not only do things like shelter belts and wetlands and riparian areas, not only do they provide benefits to the farm, but they also provide them to the public and wildlife as well. So making sure that farmers can be recognized and rewarded for these types of projects on the landscape. And really, I've been spending a little bit of time, diving into some of the programs that are in Canada, maybe starting to take a look at some of the programs that maybe work in other countries, and just working overall to get a better understanding of maybe what farmers are looking for in these types of programs. For example, payment scheme. Would you prefer an annual payment or a one-time lump sum, that kind of thing? Just getting a better idea of what types of, or how these programs would work best and most successfully. So this is the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, so SCAP, hasn't actually begun. It won't begin until April 1st, 2023. But under this announcement that came in July of last year through the federal, provincial, and territorial meeting, this is replacing the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, so CAP, if you're familiar with that one. They did announce the Resilient Agricultural landscape program under SCAP. So the reason I'm bringing it up is because it actually is focused on, sorry, I see Dale taking a picture, maybe I'll wait. There we go. So the reason I'm bringing it up is because this is similar to what I was just talking about. It's looking for, or it's going to be a program that provides payment for ecosystem services. So it was announced as a $250 million federal, provincial, territorial cost-shared program. It will be administered by provinces, so it's not necessarily a fully federal program. Each province is going to be able to do their own thing, and it's going to hopefully complement some of the programs that are already up and running in some of the provinces. So I know Manitoba has their GROW program, PEI has, an ALICE program. I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet in Saskatchewan, but this is something that hopefully will be coming your way, and to be able to provide some funding for these ecological goods and services and these projects on the landscape. So like I said, unsure what it'll look like right now. The SCAP programming to launch on April 1st, 2023. Don't necessarily know if this is going to start right at the same time, but overall these environmental goods and services projects will hopefully, the goal is to have them help improve soil health, water quality, increase wildlife habitat, decrease GHG emissions, and strengthen overall resilience of agricultural landscapes. So that is this new government program that should be coming our way shortly. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight a few take-home messages. Overall, CCGA is working to provide that voice for canola farmers on the national stage, and to just better understand where these policies are coming from, where these regulations are coming from, and if we can provide, any sort of alternative suggestion, we're there to do it. So overall, global initiatives do impact national policies and agendas, especially in the environmental file. It's where some of these initiatives are coming from. CCGA is at the table in many of these national conversations to ensure farmer voices are heard. Farmers know best what works on their individual farms, so we just need to make sure that you guys have the tools in your toolbox to be able to do what's best for your farms. Farmers need an enabling policy environment, so as these new technologies, these new BMPs are all coming out, just making sure that we have this policy environment that enables them to really get from the research stage down to at the farm gate level. And really, now more than ever, we should be seeking to intensify production and produce more high-quality canola, Canadian canola. And again, lastly, sustainability has got to focus on all three pillars. It can't just focus on one. I heard someone say, I don't know who said it, I can't quote them, but someone said you can't be green if you're in the red, so just have to make sure that we focus on that piece as well. Oh, and then this is just a little plug. We have a year in review that just came out for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. It's called Building Connections. You can find that on our website as well. You can check it out. It won't have everything I just talked about in it, but it'll have things that we did the year before in it. So take a look if you're interested. All right. I'll put my contact info there. That's it. Anybody have any questions? I don't know if I didn't get a red flag or anything yet. Okay. I hope I got us on time. It is a voluntary target right now, yeah. So that's the wording that was in the discussion document from the government. So right now, the fertilizer emission reduction target, that consultation, we haven't seen a What We Heard report or anything from it. So we're kind of in this waiting phase to hear back from, government will report on kind of what they heard through the consultation. So we know what we submitted in conjunction with Canola Council of Canada, but we don't really know what every other group or who else has submitted or what they said. So hopefully we hear back shortly around that, and maybe it'll provide a little bit more clarity.